There are actually two organizations represented here today. One is the Louisiana Chemical Association, which consists of 65 companies that operate chemical plants at about 100 locations in Louisiana. And the second organization is called the Louisiana Chemical Industry Alliance. It consists of over 800 companies that do business with the chemical plants. If you look at a chemical plant as an aircraft carrier, in order to have a fleet, you got to have a lot of other boats. Well, our chemical plants are like huge aircraft carriers, and there are lots of folks that do work for and with these plants that keep them competitive and make them operate safely. And that is that group, the Louisiana Chemical Industry Alliance. Every year we have something called an annual legislative conference, and we bring the members of both organizations together to talk about what's going on at the state capitol. We always hold it in the middle of the legislative session so that the topics are current. We bring in outstanding speakers to talk with us about what's going on in Baton Rouge. And this year we had a special treat because we had 8 U.S. senatorial candidates speaking at a panel discussion this morning. For the first time in many, many, many years, in fact, for the first time in over 80 years, after this Senate election that we're having this year, Louisiana will have 2 senators with very, very, very little seniority. And so this next election is very important so that we can have a member of the United States Senate join Senator Bill Cassidy and begin creating more seniority for the state in the U.S. Senate. And the reason there's a Senate election is because Senator David Vitter is retiring from the Senate after 2 terms. As we said, we're opening the presentations with 2 minutes of introductory remarks, and our first presenter will be Troy Hebert. Troy.
Well, thank you, Megan Kelly. I'm sorry, Dan Mornay. Go Trump, because God help us if Hillary gets elected. Good morning to everyone. I appreciate being here. Let me begin by first saying those of you in the audience that love political correctness, now might be the time for y'all to go take a bathroom break. I want you to think about the political environment we're in. I want you to ask yourself a few of these questions. If the Democratic establishment represents the poor and a large segment of people that don't want to work, and the Republican establishment represents the rich and a lot of people who don't have to work, then who's out there representing the rest of us? Who's out there fighting and representing for the middle class? Now, why is that important to you in this room? It's because this industry and those of you in this room, we wouldn't have a middle class in Louisiana if it were not for this industry. You're the one that creates over 27,000 jobs, paying an average of $95,000 a year. You actually put the middle class to work, and what do you get in return? You get blasted every day by what I call the 3 serial job killers. The politicians raising your taxes, the bureaucrats strangling you with red tape and bureaucracy, and the trial lawyers basically suing you and taking off of your bottom line. I believe that if we don't change who we send to Washington, I don't know how we're going to continue creating the jobs that keep people in Louisiana working. What I want to ask you to think about is that, you know, the definition of political insanity is that if you keep sending the same type of people to Washington over and over again and expecting something to change, it's not going to happen. I don't know about you, but I have enough. And if you have enough, go to my website, gotenough.org. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hebert. Ms. Fayard.
Well, good morning. My name is Caroline Fayard, and I grew up in Denham Springs, went to Episcopal High School here in Baton Rouge, and had a lot of friends whose families worked at Exxon. So at an early age, I was very familiar with the petrochemical industry and the chemical industry in general. And I want to thank you for letting me be here today, and I look forward to our engaging panel discussion. Obviously, this industry is incredibly important to Louisiana. I mean, I think it's something like $8.8 billion in exports alone. You create around 27,000 to 28,000 direct manufacturing jobs for us here in Louisiana. And there are going to be a lot of facts and figures, and I look forward to having an enlivened discussion. But really, on a lighthearted note, since we're going to have a substantive policy discussion, when people ask me my position now that I'm running for office on the chemical industry, it occurred to me what I really just wanted to say was something like, well, you know, this morning I got up and I drove in a car that runs on gasoline and 4 rubber tires to this event here. I had a cup of coffee and a styrofoam cup in my hand, and I did stop at the red light and check my makeup in the mirror, my mascara, my lipstick. I noticed that my hair probably needed some of those natural blonde highlights pretty soon. And I made a mental note that on my way home I needed to pick up my dry cleaning and probably pick up some dish detergent so I could do the dishes when I got back. So as a career woman who's trying to have it all in a media-driven environment and age with some level of grace, when someone asks me my position on the chemical industry, I say yes. Thank you very much for having me here today, and I look forward to our discussion.
Thank you. Congressman Boustany.
Thank you, Dan, and I want to thank you and all of your organization and the member companies here for the jobs and the innovation that's going on in this state and the investment. Let's face it, our state and our country are facing very serious challenges. You can read about it every day in the newspaper. It's a talk around the kitchen table, around the water cooler. And as a cardiothoracic surgeon, let me tell you, my life was spent facing down life and death situations every day, building the trust of the patients and the families I had to treat, and getting them back to work and back to their loved ones in good health. It's about results. And the fact of the matter is, we've got serious problems in this country. We've got people who want to talk, they want to say cute lines, but what we need are real results. And that's what I was able to do, not only as a heart surgeon, but as a U.S. Congressman. It's been a privilege to work with all of you, to serve Louisiana, to identify problems that you have brought to me with permitting, with regulations, and legislative problems that we've gone forward to tackle, some with success. It's nary a week where I don't get called about calling some agency to move a permit forward. And we've done it, and we've done it successfully many times. Just ask Sasol, ask Cheniere, and some of the other companies that have called on me. Too much talk, too much inaction. It's time to get serious. It's time to get serious about the problems facing this country. And what Louisiana is going to need is a U.S. Senator who's dedicated to getting the job done and showing results, a U.S. Senator who can deliver. This election is going to be about national security, about growing this economy, and safeguarding our American values. I ask for your support as we go forward on November 8th for the United States Senate. Go to charlesboustany.com. You can find a lot more information. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. Commissioner Campbell.
Thank you, Dan. I want to congratulate this industry. I don't know where you knew how to hire these good lobbyists, Mr. Bowser and Mr. Bornay. I served in the legislature 27 years. These guys do a great job for you. I know you know that. They're very well respected. And Jim Harris, they are very well respected. They do an excellent job representing you. When they come to see you, they mean business, and it's nice to have people like that working for you. So y'all ought to give them a raise. I don't know what you're paying them, but you ought to give them a raise. Thank you so much for having me here. I'm Foster Campbell. I live on a farm in Bossier Parish. I've had 6 children, one passed away. I have a son who's a neurosurgeon. I have daughters that went to Baylor that they're nurses. But I have been a hard-working businessman all my life. I taught school, started off teaching school in Houghton, Louisiana. Then I got an insurance agency, and I farm now in 3 different parishes. I am married. I've been blessed, been very blessed with in business. But I've been fighting for you on the Public Service Commission. I have fought for your site-specific rates. Regulate energy. I see some energy folks out there. You can ask them. Energy is a monopoly, and it's very important that your rates that you pay are reasonable. We have some of the most reasonable rates in the United States of America, which helps us attract jobs to this state. I need your help. I've been a fighter all my life. No politician in Louisiana has fought more for people than I have. I'm very proud of that. And I'm in this race to fight for people in Washington, D.C., just like I've been fighting for them here in Louisiana for years. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Colonel Manis.
Thank you, Dan. I'm retired Air Force Colonel Rob Manis from Madisonville, and I want to thank Dan and Keith and LCA for hosting this, and thank the member organizations for being members and for what you do in support of your own industry and the oil and gas industry here in Louisiana. You know, what sets me apart is my 3 decades of real-world leadership experience. The folks on my right over here have over 100 years of elected office experience. I rose from the lowest enlisted ranks to retire as a full colonel. I commanded the 6th largest Air Force base in the world. I commanded a B-1 bomber squadron in combat in Afghanistan and Iraq wars. I advised the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, the Secretary of Defense, and the President of the United States. I've led nuclear operations and planning. I wrote 3 pages in the Black Book. That's in the nuclear football that's carried with the president. You have to be the expert in strategic deterrence and nuclear operations to do that. I was on the team that led the planning for the global war on terror after I survived the Pentagon attack on 9/11. I hold master's degrees from Harvard University's Kennedy School, the U.S. College of Naval Warfare, and Air Command and Staff College, and where we studied international security, foreign policy, national strategy, and politics. And the bottom line is, ladies and gentlemen, I'm very glad to be here. I'm the different one, just like Mr. Trump is. No one else on this stage has experienced the high level of operational decision-making and strategic planning that I have, or is prepared to lead in our nation's critical policy-making bodies as I am. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Colonel. Congressman Fleming.
Well, good morning, and thank you for coming out. I'm Congressman John Fleming from the 4th District. We've been informed by what's going on with this presidential election, that there is a lot of anger and frustration with what has been going on in Washington. It's very clear why. The liberal progressive policies of the Democrat Party have ruined this economy. We've not had economic growth anywhere near the historic levels that we normally have. But I'm not just picking on Democrats. The Republican Party has been part of it. They have been, even though I'm a Republican, a conservative Republican, I have to tell you our leadership has failed us in standing up against the Obama policies that come out of Washington. As a result of that, I'm co-founder of the House Freedom Caucus that forced Speaker Boehner to resign and blocked number 2 from taking over. Now, what's important is this. We need leadership and understanding about the economy. I can't tell you how many people in Washington know nothing about running a business. Apart from being a military veteran and a practicing physician for over 40 years, I started companies back in the 80s and 90s. I opened the first Subway restaurant in North Louisiana. We have 38 today. A master licensee for 158 UPS stores across the region. I still have over 500 employees. And if you've had this baptismal experience that I've had, that it's Thursday night and you have $8,000 in the bank and you have a $20,000 payroll to make the next day, then you know exactly what I'm talking about. And a lot of people are going through this today. So I look forward to talking with you more about what we need to do to turn this economy around, which includes reforming our tax code, lowering our tax rates, lowering our corporate tax rates, and rolling back the horrible regulations. And last but not least, repeal completely this awful Obamacare law that is devastating our businesses. Thank you.
Thank you, Congressman. Treasurer Kennedy.
My name is John Kennedy, and I'm running for the United States Senate because I want my country back. Here's what I see in America today. I see too many undeserving people at the top getting special treatment in bailouts. And I see too many undeserving people at the bottom getting handouts. And I see the rest of us in the middle getting the bill. And we can't pay it anymore. And that's why Americans are angry, and that's why they feel stuck, because it's harder than ever to get ahead, and it's easier than ever to do nothing. Now, this country was founded by geniuses, but some days I think it's being run by idiots. It's true you can't fix stupid, but you can vote it out. Now, there's some really good members of the United States Congress, but as a group, as an institution, I can't figure out what they've been good for the last 8 years. I think they've done a lousy job for the American people. The big government Republicans and the Ritz-Carlton Democrats. I think President Obama has done an even lousier job. I think Secretary Clinton will do even worse. You want 52 weeks of vacation a year? Vote for her. She'll bankrupt your company. As far as I'm concerned, all of those folks need to be ashamed of what they've done to the American people. They need to hide their heads in a bag. I'm not part of the club in Baton Rouge, and I won't be part of the club in Washington, D.C. Send me to Washington, and I'll fight for you. I'll be tougher than a $3 steak.
Thank you, Treasurer Kennedy. Former Congressman Gow, it's interesting, we understand why you were late, but when we pulled straws, you came in 8th, so it's sort of like perfect timing, okay? You will close first, however, when we do close the panel. Former Congressman Joseph Gow, welcome.
Thank you very much. I had the great opportunity of representing the 2nd Louisiana Congressional District from 2009 through 2010. And just to briefly tell you about my background, I was born and raised in Vietnam. My father was a military officer, and after the war, he was imprisoned for over 6 years in the communist re-education camp. My mother remained in Vietnam to take care of my father and my siblings. So I was basically orphaned when I was 8 and came to the U.S. In 1975. And through a lot of will and hard work, I was able to grow up in this great country and to be a proud Louisianian who worked hard for the people of the 2nd Congressional District. And I believe that a strong leader is a person who is able to work across the aisles, to solve the problems, to look at our problems seriously, and to seriously solve the problems. I believe that many candidates, they speak some very good words. They might show great anger, but at the same time, when it comes down to hard work, I believe that no one up here can outwork me. So again, I'm proud to be a former member of Louisiana Congressional Delegation, and I hope that come November, you will vote and support for a leader who has proven to be able to work across the aisles. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Gow. We'll begin our questioning now, and what we'll do to begin the questioning, we'll start alphabetically. So Congressman Bustani will have the first question to lead off. The second question we'll ask Commissioner Campbell. The third question we'll ask Congressman Gow to lead off. So with the first question, and Congressman Bustani, to begin, 1 minute answers, please. What do you consider the role of Congress in helping relieve some of the regulatory overreach of federal agencies? Multi-agency regulatory activities, though in many cases appropriate and necessary, often go far beyond the intent of Congress. Is there a way to rein in bureaucratic overreach that stymies economic growth and job creation?
Well, there's no question that presidents from Franklin Roosevelt on through President Obama's time have exercised this type of over-abuse of the regulatory authority at the expense of Congress. Congress should make the law, not the president. We have passed in the House 3 times the REINS Act, which says any regulation that's put forth by the administration has to be voted on by Congress, House and Senate, before it can have the force of law. Just last week, I authored legislation that would invoke the Congressional Review Act in dealing with a specific financial services regulation. This is one of the top problems we're facing today. We need to use every single tool we have to roll back the regulatory authority, and that includes oversight. With the IRS, I conducted oversight and unveiled abuses and got rid of 3 IRS commissioners in a 4-year period of time based on the oversight I did. Real results, not just talk.
Thank you, Congressman. Commissioner Campbell, same question.
Well, since I have served in the legislature and on the Public Service Commission, I have been someone with common sense. I know that you can overregulate anything, and I would fight to use common sense in regulation when it's stopping business, to go to Washington, to work with the people in Washington. I'm someone who can work on both sides of the aisle. I have a proven record of results in education and in different other things, and I have worked very, very hard to use common sense on the Public Service Commission when it comes to rate regulation. A lot of times the government overreaches, and we try to work with you. I'll try to work with you, and I have an open door policy. I listen to your problems, and I'll try my best to work with you to make sure that the work you're trying to do is done and you don't have excess regulations.
Mr. Gao.
Thank you very much. I personally had experience with a federal bureaucracy after Hurricane Katrina. As you know, after Katrina, FEMA was a major obstacle in regards to the rebuilding of the Orleans Parish and the surrounding areas. So after I defeated Bill Jefferson in 2008, my main focus was to reform FEMA, which I was able to do. Subsequently, after getting rid of the people in FEMA who were obstructing the money that would be necessary to rebuild New Orleans, we were able to push out over $1 billion to help rebuild a devastated area. So I have a record of addressing bureaucracy, and that record is to get rid of people who are not willing to work and to put in position the people who are willing to work and serve.
Ms. Fayard.
Well, interestingly, I have a record of dealing with overburdensome regulations as well. I recently, actually in December, Glow Airlines launched out of New Orleans, and I have been helping launch this airline. It was actually founded by my brother, Calvin Fayard, for about the last 5 years now. And certainly we had to deal with the FAA and continue to do so on a daily basis in trying to grow and expand this business and connect our state and indeed our region. And I will say that what I have learned throughout this process is that while you absolutely have to have relationships with your congressional delegation, and there are many people here who certainly understand that, you also have to have a relationship with the agency itself, the people who administrate it, and sometimes that even the person in the White House. So the quality of that relationship actually is the beginning of the discussion to try and roll back burdensome federal regulations that do inhibit business people from going about and creating an economy that works for everyone.
Congressman Fleming.
Ladies and gentlemen, there is a fourth branch of government that you won't find in the Constitution. It's called the Washington bureaucracy. Today, they write all the laws through the regulatory mechanism, and it's frustrating as a member of Congress to constantly try to fend back, try to reduce the impact. But everything from Waters of the U.S., which basically federalizes most of, if not all, of Louisiana, the Clean Power Plan, which is actually cap and trade, which didn't get passed through Congress, which was controlled by Democrats, but now they're trying to do it through the regulatory mechanism. And again, last but not least, Obamacare, which is when it comes to regulations and the bureaucracy, HHS has over 1,000 decision points that they can make that impact you in your personal life. We need to rein all of this back. And with the new president, I think we can do that. I look forward to being a part of it.
Mr. Hebert.
As the former commissioner of alcohol and tobacco control, you actually used my agency. And that was every time after you finished meeting with one of the bureaucrats or after you went trying to get a permit, you probably had to go get a drink somewhere. And I permitted the facility that you went get a drink. You know, when I took over at ATC, I inherited a very troubled agency. I took over a deficit. I made it a surplus. But more importantly, the statistic I want to tell you about is I cut the number of employees in half. And the reason I did that is because you don't need all these bureaucrats killing jobs. And what I did was I didn't cut the services. I actually increased them. And what we did was the time it took to get a permit when I took over was 35 days. I reduced it down to 3. And I passed a law that said if you didn't get your alcohol permit in 3 days, it was free. And you know why I did that? Because I didn't do it for me. I didn't do it for you. I did it to put the pressure on the bureaucrats because there's only one thing they understand, and that's money and funding. And so what I tell you is that, you know, the EPA has 15,000
Congressman,
employees
I
and $8
mean,
billion.
Troy, we gotta
Okay,
keep the
thank
time. But were the permits free or was the booze free? That's the question.
Well, they were both free if it took
Okay.
too long.
Thank you very much. Treasurer Kennedy.
You know, everybody in this room wants clean air and bright water. But here's the problem. In order for you to create the 27,000 jobs you create for Louisiana, you've got to comply with 67,000 federal regulations, 30,000 of which are from the EPA alone. And that's just a fact. And the problem is that too many of those regulations, they don't brighten the water and they don't clean the air. All they do is cost money and cost jobs. And you know what the United States Congress has done about it? Nothing. Now here's what we need to do. We need to reform the Toxic Substances and Control Act. We need fewer rules. We need simpler rules. We need quicker decisions by bureaucrats. We need government websites that a normal person can navigate. And we need a new rule. If you are a regulator and you want to offer a new regulation, you've also got to point to 3 that you're going to eliminate.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy. Colonel Manus.
Thank you. Of course we need to protect the environment, but we don't need to protect it and make it so green that we can't produce oil and gas, which is the lifeblood of Louisiana, and that is the lifeblood of what makes America great. Louisiana's environment and our oil and gas industries would be much better off if Louisiana controlled and was dictating environmental policy, not the federal government. Look, the politicians up here, a couple of them are doctors, so I know that they're only treating the symptoms, not the diseases. Until we recover lawmaking authority back to the Congress and away from faceless bureaucrats at places like the EPA and all of the other unconstitutional alphabet soup agencies in Washington, we will not treat the disease. We need to move the decision-making power on the environment back to Louisiana, where people like you have the responsibility and the control over the state-level agency. Thank you.
Former Congressman Gall, you will lead off, and then we will go in reverse order from the opening. Thank you. 2 minutes, sir, please.
Thank you very much, Dan. The country is angry, and we rightfully should be angry. We are angry because government fails to serve. We are angry because of the lack in job creation. We are angry because our children are growing up in environments in which violence is a problem, in which education does not adequately prepare them for the future. I believe that as we move forward as a country, we need a strong leader who is willing to tackle the problems no matter the political consequences. We need a strong leader who is willing to work on both sides of the aisles in order to get the solutions to help our children, to help our struggling families. And I have a record of doing that. I have a record of working with everyone in order to solve the problems that we face as a country and as a community. And as we go forward as a country, I ask and appreciate your support and your vote this coming election. Thank you.
Ms. Fayard.
Well, I want to thank you all for being here today and being so patient with us. You know, look, as I've said throughout the presentation, I have a law practice right now in Denham Springs, Louisiana, as well as New Orleans. And I did help launch a regional airline called GLOW, so I do know a little bit about burdensome regulation. And I think you can pretty much tell that I'm not going to be your typical candidate, and I'm not going to be your typical senator, and I'm not part of the good old boys network. It's pretty plain. But the truth of the matter is that I'm running because we need a new generation and a new direction of leadership, not only in Louisiana, but also in Washington. We've had it the R way, we've had it the D way, and it's clear that most people have just had it. And we need to ask ourselves, can we really afford another 8 years of acrimony and rhetoric that gets us nowhere, of paying people to go to their respective corners and do nothing? I have a history of delivering results in difficult circumstances. That's how you launch an airline in today's environment. I have a history of bringing disparate sides together and living to trade another day, which is what we had to do in the BP oil spill case. And I want to understand the needs and the issues of industry and business in Louisiana because we are too important to be forgotten in Washington, D.C. And we have to have someone advocating for us, no matter who the occupant of the White House is. And the truth of the matter is that I am also running for the have-tos in life. You hear a lot about the haves and the have-nots in this political rhetoric game that we play. But what about the have-tos? The single mother who has to get up early to drop her 2 kids off at the bus stop before she races to her job at the plant in Geismar. The retiree who has to cut their pill in half and still can't decide whether they can afford either side. Or the small business person who has a dream but has to put it on hold because he has to take care of an aging parent and can't get the permit that he needs on time. These are the people that are forgotten in Washington. And the truth of the matter is most of you are have-tos too. You all know what it means to make sacrifices, and you all know what it means to try to get along, to go along, to make your business and industry better and provide for your families. So that's why I'm running for United States Senate, because I truly believe that it's time for a change in leadership in Washington, D.C., and I'd be proud to be your next United States Senator.
Thank you, Ms. Fayard. Those of you who are keeping score, you will notice that I screwed the order up a little bit. I'm sorry. My apologies, but we're getting back on track here now for Treasurer Kennedy next.
Let me tell you some of the things I believe in that will guide me in the United States Senate. I believe in God. Sometimes it's hard, but that's why they call it faith. I believe in religious liberty. I believe in protecting the life of the unborn. I believe in more freedom and not more free stuff. I believe that government at all levels has gotten too big. It tries to do too much, and so it does too much of that badly. I believe America ought to enforce its immigration laws. I think Congress has done a bipartisan, abysmal job of that. I think Obamacare sucks. I think that, I believe love is the answer, but you ought to own a gun just in case. I believe America is the most powerful country in the history of the world, but by God, we ought to start acting like it. I believe that the biggest threat to America today is not men wearing turbans, living in caves in the Middle East. It's politicians in Washington, D.C. wearing suits and ties and nice dresses. We got to take our country back, folks. Now, look, you know me. I try not to be rude, but I speak my mind. I am not part of the club. They don't want me, and I don't want them. And I will not be part of the club in Washington, D.C. You send me to Washington, and I'll fight for you. And I will not let you down.
Thank you, Treasurer Kennedy. Congressman Fleming.
Okay. Well, again, thank you for being here today, and this has been enjoyable. Look, I grew up in a working class home. My mother became disabled when I was 5. My dad had to work 2 and 3 jobs. Many times I would go with him on the jobs just so I could be with my dad. And I had this dream from age 11, inspired by my grandmother, who was a nurse, to be a doctor one day. And I made those plans, and just before I left for college, my dad died at age 43, suddenly of a heart attack. So I had to take care of a disabled mom, a little brother and sister, and somehow get my way through college. I did it in 3 years, went to medical school, and I got a Navy scholarship to make my way through medical school, and I served my country proudly in uniform for 6 years. But I remember so many times sitting around the kitchen table, worrying about finances, how my parents were going to make it all work. And you know what? Today, we have a situation where we have families all over the country that are doing the same thing, tightening their belts, and yet we have state and federal government expanding, never tightening its belt. Ladies and gentlemen, it is time to take back Washington to the people, to the American people, make politicians responsible instead of taking care of their career progression and being part of the old boys club. Thank you, and please consider me for the U.S. Senate.
Thank you, Congressman. Colonel Maness.
We've heard a lot about anger up here today from the folks on my right. Yes, the American people, and I think the people of Louisiana, because I've been all around this state several times in the last 2 years, are angry. They're angry at the political class because they campaign on things like what you hear up at this table today, and then they go to Washington, D.C., and they don't do it. That's a problem. I appreciate my opponents and what they've accomplished. I also fully understand that they understand politics. Well, guess what? I understand the real world, folks. I'm the only person on this stage that's practiced leadership in a world that's like yours and that truly understands what you do every day. And you know, folks up here, we're going to say that we're going to fight for you like they do for veterans. How's that going for veterans? Homeless, dying on waiting lists at the VA. It's because they don't understand it. You can't fight for what you don't understand. And like you, I've had to get hundreds of contractors and leaders with big egos to the table to find real solutions. And I've got a successful documented record of doing that in the United States government. And I can do that for you in the United States Senate. I was responsible for security at the most valuable U.S. assets when I was a commander of the 6th largest Air Force base. Just like you're responsible for security of your critical chemical and petrochemical infrastructure installations. I was responsible for the health and safety of 23,000 men and women when I had a military medical group under my command, just as you're responsible for medical care at your installations when an incident happens. At Entergy, I ran the safest hurricane recovery in the company's history during Isaac's recovery. And most of all, there's no second chances in your industry, just like there are no second chances in my profession. We need folks that get to the business of leading the key national security and utility teams that I spent more than 3 decades successfully doing. And
Colonel,
finally,
thanks very much.
I'll make
Wrap
you
it.
one promise, and that I'll do what I say I'm going to do on this campaign trail when I get to Washington, D.C. Thank you.
Commissioner Campbell.
Y'all take a deep breath. I'm the only one in here that doesn't think everything's going to hell. Look, I got a little stock, and some of these wealthy people up here has probably got a whole lot of stock, but I like the stock market lately. I've sort of made a little money. You show me a politician that is against everything, and let me tell you what I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you somebody that can't get anything done. You show me somebody that's negative, and I'll promise you, you check his record, and he can't get anything done. I believe in America. I think the day's sunny outside. I just came from North Louisiana where my house flooded. Hell, it isn't raining up there. I'm happy. I know how to go to work with people. I have a record. There's an old saying in North Louisiana, before all these people tell you what they're going to do, why don't you ask them what they've done? I have a record of accomplishment. But you know how I've been able to have an accomplishment and have an accomplishment? Real easy. I work with people. I don't think I have all the answers. Our problem today is that we're all fighting each other. We're all fighting, one side against the other side. This guy's right. That means we all have to be with him or wrong. I can go to Washington with good common horse sense, like I've practiced in the Senate and on the Public Service Commission, and help the people of Louisiana. I have a saying. I have worked hard, I talk straight, and I make sense. I'd like for you to vote for me. My door will always be open. We might not always agree, but like Mr. Harris will tell you, Mr. Bonet will tell you, I will be open to you and your problems, and I want to see your industries do well in Louisiana because you produce 30,000 jobs of people making a living, people who can send their kids to school. That's what I'm for. So I'd appreciate your help. And when you see me, I'm going to have a smile on my face because I always think we can do better. I don't have the blues. I don't want the blues. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Commissioner. Congressman Bustani.
Thank you, Dan, and I want to thank all of you for your patience with us today. Thank you for what you do day in and day out, creating jobs, innovating in the American economy at a time when the headwinds are immense, whether it's coming from Washington or general economic conditions facing the world today. I've been blessed. I had a wonderful cardiothoracic surgery career, heart surgery career. And I mentioned to you about trust earlier and facing life and death situations and making decisions. But there is no thing more important than an individual human life. And thousands of people trusted me to open their chest, stop their heart, hold it in my hands, and fix it. And that's the same seriousness I've taken to this job in the United States Congress and will take to the United States Senate. The fact is, talk is cheap, and you've heard a lot of that today. Results matter. I've gotten results with those patients over the years. I understand the healthcare system. I understand what this election's going to be about. It's about our national security. Our very lives and our interests are at risk today. And a lot needs to be done. I've traveled to all the hot spots with our troops. I've walked in the streets of Fallujah to see what was going on with our Marines at a time when the surge was going on and the violence was at the peak, because I wanted to go. Our economy's not growing. We need a U.S. Senator who understands that decisions in Riyadh affect employment and rain and knows all those things that are connecting it and the policies that need to be put in place to help America grow and lead. I firmly believe in American leadership, and I firmly believe that, that Louisiana will play an important role. My God, we're centrally located on the Gulf of Mexico with the Mississippi River in our port system. We've got agriculture, the petrochemical industry, manufacturing, oil and gas. We've got everything it takes to be successful. We need a U.S. Senator who can lead and who will represent Louisiana interests at that table, because if Louisiana does well, the United States will do well. I want to be that leader for you. I'm staking my entire future on the hope that you will elect me to represent you, to give me the privilege, the honor of representing you in the United States Senate.
Thank you, Congressman. Mr. Hebert, you have a right to close.
Well, first of all, I want to commend everybody at this table. It's not easy to run for office. Not only is it a great deal of sacrifice to everybody at this table, but more importantly, it's a great deal of sacrifice for the families of the people that run. So I want to commend everybody up here for taking the stand and doing that. You know, on November 8th, people keep saying we're going to have an election. Well, with the establishment of super PACs, we're not going to have an election. We're going to have an auction. I want you to think about that. I want you to think about the environment we live in politics today, the way it's all about the money. Now, you know, there used to be an old saying about the sign outside the politician's door, and it says, for sale. Well, now with super PACs, the sign says sold. You think about the millions and millions of dollars that are raised in these super PACs, and they get behind these candidates. I don't want a super PAC, and I'm not going to have a super PAC, and I would challenge the people up here to do the same. I would challenge the people to say, you know what? It shouldn't be about the money. It should be about the ideas. We shouldn't have to owe all these people when we go to Washington. I believe this. You need somebody in Washington that's going to help fight against those 3 serial job killers I told you about: politicians, bureaucrats, and lawyers. And you got to have somebody who's willing to go do that and not going to be beholden to those groups. I want to take an opportunity in my closing to personally thank the people in this room, again, for putting the people of Louisiana to work. I don't know of another industry that has an average of $95,000 a person per year. And the last and most important group I want to thank, by far, is this Sunday we're going to be celebrating the most special day, and that's Mother's Day. So I want to thank all the mothers in here for all the things that you do. Give them a hand.
We're in a very competitive environment. We compete against Texas, we compete against other states in the United States, but we also compete against operations in foreign countries. And so we need a stable energy supply. We need natural gas that's relatively inexpensive, competitively priced, and abundant. We need workforce to come and build our plants and to run our plants. We need young men and women who are interested in the trades and the crafts and in process technology. These are types of jobs that don't need 4-year degrees, but they need good, solid 2-year degrees that could come in and help run our plants. And the pay is very, very good. So those are the challenges. The challenges are always competition, making sure we have the energy that we need to run our plants, and making sure we have the workforce, the human resource, raw material, to build, maintain, and run our plants safely and competitively.
One of the biggest challenges we're having right now is workforce development. With all the investments in Louisiana and all the new jobs created, we really need local people to be able to get these jobs, get the training, get the skills, because the challenges are there, the openings are there. So we need really to invest in our, in our workforce and get them to get the skills we need for our plants.
Current legislative session, as we know, it has been focused on revenue generation. So lots of new taxes that have come in that in our industry we certainly have to absorb. So how is that going to affect us? How can we work with the current administration to come to fair and balanced approaches? Is obviously a key issue for us. Continue to work on workforce development. We heard from the Secretary of LED, a lot of great encouraging words on great cooperation between industry and this department on improving the readiness of people in our state to come to jobs. A lot of great efforts over the last year, so we want to continue those things from the Jump Start programs through Fast Start programs. We've had some great successes, so we like to talk about it and make sure that that's still going.
Right now, we're coping with the variability in oil prices and its cascading impact throughout the industry. And while lower feedstock costs tend to help us in the chemical industry, we still have to make sure that the global economy supports the demand for our products. And we have to be able to compete globally in this business, not just domestically.
The biggest issue this year is around the taxation increases and the impact it's having to the expansion. We've had a very big expansion of the chemical industry in the past couple of years, and we're trying to keep from having the taxation increases impede that progress on growth.
I think continuing to get a skilled workforce to build and maintain the plants we operate is a challenge we'll continue to face.
What type of jobs are available in the chemical industry?
Construction crafts, welding, boilermaker, millwrights, mechanics, pipe fitters. We definitely have a deficit there that we have to fill and continue to support this industry.
What kind of a career option is it for someone to work in the chemical industry?
It's an outstanding career. It's some of the best careers we have in the state in manufacturing, wonderful lives for people in the chemical industry.
What's important to the industry, considering the scope of the investments and long-term commitment that we have for job creation and growth, is some stability and visibility on fiscal and regulatory issues. The investments that are made are very large. They pay out over a long period of time, and having a balanced environment is very important.
I think the chemical industry is poised because of all of the hydraulic fracturing and all the additional low-cost natural gas we have to continue to grow as a sector in the economy. And of course, the world economy, it needs to remain steady and good, but long term, I think if we can just get in the state some stability in our tax structure, we'll be able to continue our growth, continue to add employees. Of course, one of our concerns is workforce development. We also need to help work with the state and local areas, the trade schools, et cetera, and develop a workforce to meet the demand of some $90 billion worth of expansions that are now underway up and down the Mississippi corridor and over in Calcasieu Parish, because there's a lot of growth, both from existing industry and new industry coming on board over the next several years.
Let's talk a little bit about the chemistry that we have outside of this building right now. And I think sometimes, even when it's a rainy day, it's a great time to maybe step back a little bit and inventory the strengths that we have and the great elements that are out there right now. Certainly this industry is our bright spot. We've got a lot of challenges associated with the oil and gas industry and exploration, nearing 10,000 layoffs over in Lafayette, nearing 3,500 down in Houma Thibodaux, trying to repurpose a lot of those workers into industrial construction and some of the other great opportunities that are associated with the petrochemical industry, the gas to liquids, the LNG opportunities that we have in our state. It's actually staggering to have more than $97 billion in announced projects with more than $33 billion under contract. The kind of industrial impact and the construction and the activity and the boost to the economy that that's going to have as it moves forward. And so part of that part of that inventory of great things that we should contemplate as it relates to the industry is a very talented and attractively priced workforce that we have here in Louisiana. And while maybe the wage rates are moving forward a bit, you are still very much below the southern average and way below the national average as you engage the workforce here in Louisiana. Certainly a bright spot is the cost of energy. Due to low oil and gas prices, we enjoy some of the lowest utility rates in the nation. Entergy, CLECO, or other partners are very helpful in that regard. And certainly, we've been through times in this industry when we've seen gas prices and electricity prices at much more significant levels, and we know that has a tremendous impact on your bottom line. Our low-cost energy is absolutely essential to powering chemical plants, cost-effective production of chemicals that are critical to your bottom line. Also, mutual support for the expansion of these LNG terminals that are ongoing in our state. Those are absolutely critical to help us maintain a global presence and to see Cheniere's first ship leave and to begin to take our rightful place in a global energy economy is certainly encouraging. I just want to thank the industry because they play such an important role in the economy of our state with 28,000 direct employees and more than 230,000 in the indirect generation of jobs across our state. They're a very important part of our economic fabric.
Talk about the expansion of the chemical industry and what that is going to mean in terms of jobs for the state.
Well, certainly as global demand rises, a location such as Louisiana, which has an abundant supply of energy represented through natural gas and low electrical rates, with the ability to utilize our ports to reach global markets, with the fantastic infrastructure that we have in terms of pipelines and the synergy of all the various chemical companies that can feed each other various gases that are needed in the chemical processing or the chemical production industry, we are just set for a lot of forward investment and opportunity for growth in this industry. And for a time when we've got low oil and gas prices and challenges in the oil and gas markets, to have this industry standing up and doing so well is absolutely critical to us, but also importantly attracting the new investments, the billions of dollars of investments that are going to drive our economy in the years to come is equally as important. So the industry is positioned well and absolutely recognized by LED for their critical role that they play in our economy.
Inevitably, we came around to the issue of trying to raise revenue. And what they did last year in the regular session, they basically cut credits and rebates and so on. And you all know about those. A lot of it on business and tried to raise money. Then we had the recent special session, and we're now really depending on the sales tax more than ever before. We created the one magic clean penny. We're now up to the highest combined state and local sales tax rate in the nation. We are number one at something in Louisiana. We also reduced a lot of the exemptions off the books of those, and they made a complete hash of that. It's a total mess for people to figure out when they're being taxed what and when, and that has been a real problem. The other thing they did, which we really hammered them on, was they started taxing again the manufacturing machinery and equipment with the sales tax. I mean, come on. We spent years getting to the point of educating the public and the legislature about the need for that reform. In 2003, every single gubernatorial candidate was in favor of getting rid of the sales tax on MM&E. And yet, very casually, in almost too cavalier a manner, they popped it back on in the last minutes of the legislative session, and now you are stuck with that. And that's too bad. So our tax system right now is such a mess that the Tax Foundation, in its calculations of the 50 states, now has Louisiana at number 75, all the way down here. And not only that, but we have a fiscal cliff we're facing, because a lot of the changes that were made last year and a lot of the changes that were made in the special session, those kind of revenue increases are going to just drop off in the middle of 2018. Maybe that's a good thing in some ways. that it's going to force us to maybe make some long-term structural changes. I hope, anyway. Well, let me talk about spending for just a minute. And I'm going to talk about spending in a way that y'all are not accustomed to hearing about. We have in our state some major inflationary programs, and these are the state's highest priorities. And they are mandatory spending. And we have to keep a lid on these, or at least not make them worse. I'm talking about debt. I'm talking about group health benefits for the public employees and the retired public employees. I'm talking about the pensions, and I'm talking about state spending on local government. I think one of the main messages we want to make today is just to try to explain that this chronic imbalance that we have every year in our budget, the chronic instability that we have, and also just the uncertainty that businesses face. This is not good for the state. It's not a healthy environment that we're in. We're hoping we can eventually try to improve the whole process, try to do structural reforms that'll make a good long-term impact. As the president of the Public Affairs Research Council, I'm also on a task force, the state fiscal task force that's supposed to be looking at all of these issues and looking at them in a holistic way and making recommendations. Now, there have been a lot of studies. There have been a lot of processing over time. I think we have a lot we can build on for a good foundation to come up with some good long-term structural reforms. And then it will be the governor and the legislature's job to take that on and to try to really make some permanent fixes so that maybe by 2018 and 2019 we'll be out of the woods in this year-to-year crisis-to-crisis mode. Crisis-to-crisis mode every year. It's not good for business, not good for higher education, not good for public services. We have a lot of work to do.
I think the message coming out of this particular session is that we are sensing something that's a little bit distressing right now in the state, and that is we're sensing that the business climate of Louisiana is deteriorating. We're sensing that there's climate change going on, not the kind that we generally talk about with the environment, but we're talking about the environment in which business has to operate. We've had billions of dollars of taxes enacted over the last couple of years that are primarily going to be borne by the business community in Louisiana. And so many of those advantages that we've had in the past that have helped grow jobs and help create really good payrolls, some of those things are now in peril. And so many companies looking to operate here and locate here are really, really concerned about the uncertainty in our business community, in the taxation that we have to deal with. That's going to affect investment down the road. And so our challenge then is to work with the legislature and to work with the administration to come forth with some permanent fixes to what happens to be an annual problem that the state has suffered over the last 8 years or so. That's the challenge. We talked a lot about that today, and we're going to talk a lot about it as we go on for the rest of this year.
If people have questions like more information, what should they do?
Well, we have a website, www.lca.org. It's very simple to find us. We're not hiding. Our office is in an office building 2 blocks from the Capitol, and we welcome all visitors to our website, and we welcome all visitors to the office as well.